And away we go. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Welcome one and all to Coffee Talk. It is time once again for Coffee Talk Live, where we will be having some discussion about what is going on in the world today. We'll take a look at some clips from the news and share a little bit of dialogue with those of you who are able to join us for the live portion. And if you happen to be listening somewhere else and you wanted to join the live portion, you can find us Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, on Coffee Talk and Prepper University. That is Coffee Talk Live at Coffee Talk Live and at Prepper University, as well as fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta, and at Coffee Talk Chat on X. And you can also find me on Rumble, and that's Coffee Talk 2. Although now that we've switched back to StreamYard doesn't want to cast to Rumble. So it's 6 of one and half dozen of the other between the two major competitors for streaming services. StreamYard does this and won't do that, and vice versa for Rumble. Oh, not Rumble, Restream. Got them mixed up. But Restream has had a lot of buggy problems, and then StreamYard doesn't want to send you anywhere. So there we are. But I as I understand that I look and sound better and there's less breaks or interruptions than I was getting with Restream. And I think it's more important that you can hear me than being able to cast to an additional platform. I'll go ahead and get started. There's Miss Kitty. Miss Kitty sitting on the floor there, looking out into the hallway, so she must hear somebody creeping around. And I'll say hello to some of the people that have been able to chime in so far. See, Helter has joined us here today, as well as Dragon. Ace, who saw the Jesus video and agrees. I'm glad somebody saw it. I'm still putting up regular videos on Coffee Talk, and I've been picking it up again on Prepper University. But yeah, very, very low viewership, unfortunately. But do check that out. It explains, tells you what to say when people get on your case about, Jesus wasn't white. How come there's a white Jesus? Yeah, that's what it's about. Jimmy is here. Bob is here. John, Jeff, Lucky is here. It says 2 hours of Coffee Talk Friday. 2 hours, huh? Brian is here. I wish I had that kind of an audience that I could pull a 2 hour episode. Well, it's a mixture of how much time do I personally have to work with versus how big is the audience. Sven is here. He says Trump brutalized Zelensky on live TV. That makes this show the second best thing I'm watching today. Spectre is here. John Boy says everything sounds good. Excellent. Peter is here from New Zealand. Paul says he's from Tenerife. Tenerife? Did I say that right? As we get ready to jump off here, and as alluded to in the thumbnail for this particular podcast, what's the bigger story? Because the whole thing with Ukraine and Zelensky is being overshadowed by Epstein. And that's turned into a mess already. Well, we'll go ahead and we'll knock Epstein out really quick, and then we'll move on to Zelensky. But yeah, we'll go ahead and get that going because there's already problems. Because Pam Bondi is already pitching a fit, and rightly so, because they're playing games. And that would be the FBI. The FBI is playing games with Pam. So here we go. Paul says, if I miss the live stream, I always watch it later. I appreciate that, Paul. I appreciate that, Paul. And this is a Daily Express article. It says Pam Bondi explodes at the FBI over missing Epstein files as hundreds of pages are blacked out again. Yeah, there we are. Hundreds of pages blacked out again. And it's kind of interesting, before even getting into the article, to take a look at the direction that things have gone in with the FBI. As you know, the FBI, the original intention of the FBI was to be able to cross borders, okay? Is to be able to to cross borders. And Peter says they raided the New York FBI offices today because they only put out what we already know. Yeah, and Lucky says it's a complete clown show. It is. There's no excuse for it. They've back in the old days with bootleggers and bank robbers. You know, look at Bonnie and Clyde. You could rob a bank in Ohio and cross the border, and then it's anybody's game. They can't. Even counties couldn't cross their county lines to pursue you. It's not like it is now. So that's why the FBI came into existence, primarily because of bootleggers and, believe it or not, pinball machines, which were prohibited. Pinball machines were illegal in most places between 1930 to 1970. Look it up. I'm not kidding. That's why it's so hard to find a pre-1970 pinball machine. When Vice would capture pinball machines, they would destroy them with sledgehammers. And they do it publicly. They take pictures of it for the newspaper. It's crazy. And Raccoon has joined us, as well as Lori Martin. Glad you could join us today. And Jane Spitfire, talking about Ukraine. We're going to get to that when we're done kicking Epstein around. The FBI had a very different intention, and now it seems like they're contractors for protecting political elitists and their friends, is what it looks like now, because they're covering up for everything, even being ordered to release things, and they still want to fight. And Tuck says, don't forget to hit the like button. Absolutely, thank you. And Lucky wants to know what was the reason with the pinball machines, because pinball machines were associated with those types of establishments. The assumption was, A, it was considered a type of gambling because the earliest pinball machines would give you a ticket, kind of like the Plinko in Japan. You know, you play the Pinko, I think it's Plinko, right? Where you shoot the little ball bearing into the machine and you can get tickets and you can cash the tickets in. You used to be able to do that with pinball machines. So A, it was considered a form of gambling, and B, you typically found them in like bars or brothels or like low places, as they refer to them. So they figured that it was a vice item that was corrupting because it was attractive to youth. It corrupted them, so they wanted to destroy them. Pachinko, thank you, Tuck. I was thinking of the wrong thing. I knew what I was talking about. I just couldn't get the name right. But yeah, look that up. Look up pinball machine prohibition. You'll find it. I think from 1930 to about 1970. Anytime they found one, they would destroy it. But getting into the article here, and again, I was just emphasizing how much the FBI has changed. It's like they're like the Pinkertons now, where you hire them to strong arm people to protect your assets. So Pam Bondi exploded in a letter to the FBI Director Kash Patel, suggesting many records were missing from Epstein's documents released Thursday, as hundreds of entries appeared to be blacked out. No kidding. The AG, Attorney General, ordered the FBI to hand over the full and complete Epstein files to her by Friday morning, which is today, and directed Patel to conduct an immediate investigation into why her order for the FBI to turn over all documents was not being followed. Bondi had long teased the release of the documents. However, many have questioned how much any potential relationship between Trump and Epstein would be highlighted in the released files, since Bondi is a Trump loyalist. I don't think anything was covered because I've seen the actual, the documents are hard to look at. Actually, the original documents, they're hard to look at. The photostats are because it's pretty sloppy handwriting. But on the very earliest ones, you can see Trump's name. So they're not really covering for Trump. It's his name is there, but they're covering for freaking everybody else, apparently. Okay. And it goes on to tell you who Epstein is. We all know. It says abusing underage girls in the early 2000s and wound up serving 13 months in jail, indicted on federal charges in 2019. And of course, died in jail. We all know that story. But it's amazing to me how much how much the FBI, how much time they spend covering for people now. It's the whole fiasco with the Hunter laptop comes to mind, you know. And Fluke Band has joined us, as well as Spectre. He says, go in and take the files. Exactly. Lucky says, wouldn't that be smart to bring back if I could make some and get some contracts? So let me see here. This is Fox News. Is this the contact list? I know one of these. No, this isn't the one that I want. I'm not going to open that one. I'm going to go to the next one. Because there's something, here's the Office of Public Affairs. And I'll show you what I was just talking about. This is Department of Justice's Office of Public Affairs website, where the information that has come through so far is being publicly shared. So you can go to this website if you wanted to look for yourself and see without reading into that. You see these links down here: evidence list, flight log 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's actually 7. And then there's contact and massage lists. It says redacted. See, there's nothing in there. But you open up the earliest examples, and that's a PDF file. And these are the flight logs that go all the way back to, I believe, 1997. If you can hardly read any of this. And this is before he was doing anything weird on the island, because that didn't start until the early 2000s. Sometimes you can make out a name. Like here you see Jeffries and Anderson. It says right there, Mark Epstein. These are really hard to read. I guess it would be easier if you had it right in front of you instead of looking at a PDF file. But you can see how badly photostated that is. And somewhere in the first run, I think Trump's name pops up. I don't remember, because there's like 100 pages on each of these photostated out of the flight logs. But this is essentially what it looks like. And there are more that have not been released. But if you were curious about this, you can go to that website, and that is the Office of Public Affairs. It's an official government website, and these have been posted. These are easier to see right here. Barbara Vaughn, Jennifer Driver, Mark Middleton, and here's Donald Trump. I think this is it, right? Yeah, there's Donald Trump. And oh no, this is 1994. This is, and again, this is way before anything started at the island, correct? I don't think anything started there until the early 2000s. And Lucky says that he's a billionaire. Okay, then make a donation. Peter says it's about the cover-up, not that document release. Yeah, and Paul says Epstein worked for Mossad. That's why he was protected and most probably still alive. And I looked through page after page after page, and this is the only place I see Trump's name. If it's somewhere else, I missed it. But you can look that up for yourself. Let me back out of this again so you can see the website itself. Office of Public Affairs, and that's on www.justice.gov, because it's the Department of Justice's actual website. As a matter of fact, I'll throw that in the comments section in case anybody wants the link. And there you go. As far as any kind of actual list, and they keep fighting over this, but like I said, this is really overshadowing even what's going on with Ukraine, and that's an even bigger deal. Although I think a lot of people are curious. Obviously, they want to know, are all of these, how many of these celebrities and politicians and musicians and everybody that we've been instructed to worship are just evil? Never mind stupid or nasty or cruel, but just flat out evil. Oh, and Miss Kitty is joining me here. How are you, darling? Trying to get my attention. She's jumped up in my lap here. We'll see how long she stays. Everybody wants to know. And Sven said everybody is bad except the Clintons. They are the salt of the earth and good folks. Yeah, you're trying to stay alive. That's all you're doing. There's some names that have been deciphered, and Newsweek put them up, I believe. I think this is on this article. John wants us to make tar and feather great again. Indeed. And Joe says Zelensky just got kicked out of the White House. Interesting, because I don't know what's going on. I've got a couple of things pulled up about Zelensky. And Lucky says, do you think Donald was involved? I heard Epstein introduced him to his wife. I never heard that. I don't think he was involved. The last time I remember hearing about, and I could be off on the date, him having any contact with Epstein was in 2003. And for whatever happened, he cut ties with him to the point where he threw him out, and they never had contact again. So maybe Donald knew something at that time and didn't want any further involvement with Epstein. But, you know, it's one of those things you couldn't talk about, maybe. And Marvel Fan has joined us. Newsweek article, Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs, full list of names so far. But like I said, people want to know. People want to know how corrupt people are. That the media is always telling them to idolize. And how many so far? They've got 90 on this list. I know there's more people than that involved. Most of these names I don't recognize. Of course, there's Maxwell. I'm not jumping around too much. There we go. Maxwell, Virginia Lee Roberts, who is an Epstein victim. There's a handful on here that say redacted, but it specifies here that the redacted names on this list are victims. So there's Prince Andrew, James Michael Ostrich, Philip Barden, Kate Blanchett, David Boies, Laura Booth, Evelyn Boulay. See, a lot of these names I don't even know. Joshua Bunner, Carolyn Casey, Paul Cassell. There's Bill Clinton. I recognize that name. David Copperfield, who I've met. Nothing spectacular. He used to come into, when I worked at J. Bildner and Sons, he used to come into shop there. He lived in Brookline, Massachusetts. Alexandra Cousteau, I don't know who that is. Cameron Diaz, I recognize that name. Leonardo DiCaprio. George Lucas, I recognize that name. Oh, it jumped. Sorry about that. The article jumped on me. Trying to keep me from reading it. Come on now. Bruce Willis, I just saw there. Ed Turtle. Yeah, I don't, like I said, most of these names, I don't know who they are. Vicky Ward, Sky Roberts, Kevin Spacey. He got, his career is over because of sexual misconduct, actually messing around with little boys or young boys. Annie and Marie Farmer. I had heard, again, rumor mill, that that like Oprah Winfrey should be on that list, and Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise, and I don't know. Their names aren't on here. At least I don't see them. And there are other names that have not been revealed yet. Meg Garvin, I don't know who that is. Al Gore, I recognize that name. But, you know, I don't know who everybody is. I mean, who knows who these people are? Politicians or, you know, whatever. Lucky wants to know if Puffy's on the list. If it is, it's not on Newsweek's list. And Sven says that Epstein was banned from all of Trump's properties. Yeah, something happened way back in like 2003 or whatever. And Trump was like, nah, get the hell out of here. And don't come back. I saw, what is his name? There's another name. I just caught a glimpse of it and I lost it that I recognize. Can't think. Michael Jackson is on here. That surprises me. And God, what is his name? The physicist. I had seen him. I had seen his name somewhere. Stephen Hawking is on there. And Peter says he thinks Tom Cruise didn't like Epstein at all. It's possible. Fluke Man says Leonardo DiCaprio only goes for under 25s, so it's probably accurate. That's possible. And Brian says Cameron Diaz voiced Fiona on Shrek, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. All people said George Lucas and Mick Jagger were the masterminds behind the public humiliation sacrifice done at the Atmalt concert decades ago. And Joe says, look at Trump's latest post. It's clear Zelensky does not want peace. He disrespected America and the Oval Office. Really? And Paul wants to know about Gene Hackman. Yeah, we read about that yesterday. Gene Hackman and his wife and one of his 3 dogs found dead in their home. They suspected carbon monoxide poisoning, but the fire department and the gas company could find no evidence of carbon monoxide or any other gases in the house, which also doesn't explain why one dog was dead and the other 2 were alive. The wife was found on the floor in the bathroom, and Gene Hackman was found on the floor in the mudroom, and they had been dead for some time and decomposition had started. It's just that somebody was concerned and hadn't heard from him in a minute and contacted the sheriff's office and said, hey, can you do a check? And that's how they found him. That's how they found him. So not sure exactly what happened yet. Not sure what happened yet. But on to the real pressing news here. And this is a Wall Street Journal article coming up. Because, I mean, Epstein is a nice distraction. And that's all it really is, ultimately. Although if there are people that did evil things on that island, it would be nice to find out about it if they are famous celebrities or politicians and just shut them down. But yeah, Zelensky at the White House. And this guy, I swear, he's bipolar. Also, you don't get a feel for how short Zelensky is until you see him standing next to Trump, who's like a foot taller than him. But Trump cuts short meeting with Zelensky after tensions have flared. And there we go. So President Trump cut short. Hold on a second. That's bouncing a lot. All right. Cut short a White House meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky after the 2 leaders engaged in a combative exchange over how to negotiate a settlement for the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Quote, he disrespected the United States of America and its cherished Oval Office, Trump wrote on social media. He can come back when he's ready for peace. Okay. Ukraine had sought the meeting to the U.S. Oh, hold on. Ukraine had sought the meeting to line up U.S. support against Russian aggression, which it hoped to solidify with the signing of a mineral rights deal later in the day. But the visit ended without the scheduled press conference and the signing of the accord. The abrupt end of the meeting left unclear how much military and political support the Trump administration is prepared to provide to Kiev in the coming months. Practically zero if there's not a deal. Okay, we're not going to help anymore. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. It also muddied the prospects that a European peacekeeping force could be readied to secure a settlement if one is negotiated, since European leaders have signaled that such a deployment would need some form of American military support. In other words, just like with the funding of the war, they want the United States to do all the work. French and British leaders had met with Trump earlier this week to appeal for a U.S. backstop for such a force. Yeah. And set the stage for what they hoped would be a constructive meeting between Zelensky and Trump. Basically, Europe looks at the United States the same way the Army looked at the Black Corps in the South Park movie. We're going to call it Operation Black Shield. They want us to do everything, is what it is. That's what it is. And Sven says that Zelensky is a cokehead. He spent a fair amount of time dealing with addicts. Really? Interesting. Interesting. But, wow. He could be, but he's straight bipolar. The guy, I mean, we're not going to work with America. He goes from, I'll never work with America, to begging for us to do something. There won't be mineral rights, to yes, absolutely, I'll do mineral rights. It's 100 billion, it's 500 billion. The guy doesn't know what he wants or what he's talking about. Then he always shows up dressed semi-military. You see in the photo there. And it's like, dude, quit cosplaying Army, okay? We know your country's at war. You're not fighting it. Put on a damn suit like everybody else. That's what Armored said. He says some commentators think that Zelensky's doing cocaine. Do you believe that? I have no idea. I have no idea. But man, that guy just can't keep it pinned down. That guy just can't keep it pinned down. It says the tensions between Zelensky and Trump burst into the open Friday in the Oval Office, that's today, as the Ukrainian leader urged the U.S. not to trust Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Trump responded that Kiev needed to accept that it had a weak negotiating hand, which is true. You really have no power. You're being completely supported by the United States and Europe. And if one or the other cuts out, in this case, the United States is cutting out, you got nothing to work with. It says, but after a half hour of a generally polite discussion, the tone of the session grew contentious as disagreements that typically occur behind closed doors spilled out into the open. During the meeting, Trump repeatedly said that he has a close relationship with Putin and believes that the Russian leader will stick to a peace deal if one is struck. Zelensky said the U.S.-backed security guarantee is needed and sought to explain to Vice President Vance that the Ukraine has signed a number of agreements with Russia that Moscow had subsequently broken. Vance and later Trump, well, Ukraine's broken contracts too, so what do you want? Vance and later Trump said Zelensky had not been grateful enough for the assistance his military received from the United States. If you don't have our military equipment, Ukraine would have lost the war in weeks. And that's Trump, quote, you have to be thankful. At one point, Trump told Zelensky he is gambling with World War III. And there is the potential for that. Zelensky said that he has been thankful to the American people, but as the tense exchange continued, Trump provided a dire picture of Ukraine's military situation. You're running low on soldiers. You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards. Even as the back and forth grew more heated, Trump said he wanted the American people to see it, saying it would be great television. Zelensky urged Trump and Vance to visit the Ukraine, but Vance dismissed trips there by foreign leaders as propaganda tours. The session occurred shortly after Zelensky arrived at the White House, and Trump brought reporters into the Oval Office for what is typically a brief meeting, or greeting, excuse me. Other attendees included Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. So, yeah, that didn't go well. It went fine when Zelensky was doing his speech, but then when it came time to go there, well, this is bouncing all over the place. Let me close that. when it came time to sit down, Zelensky lost his shit again. Yeah, Flukman says it's likely early stages of World War II when Britain was heavily dependent on U.S. materials, resources, and food, but at least Brits paid for it. Last payment was in 2006. And there's Puck. Puck joined us. And Lucky says the Illuminati cards. I don't know. I don't know. But the thing is, Zelensky and I'm gonna go to the U.S. debt clock to prove my point, because we've been playing with the U.S. debt clock the last couple of weeks because it's been an interesting tool. But it also covers other countries. The debt clock looks at other countries, and that's why I want to use it for this exercise really quick. Zelensky and the Biden executive branch was trying to wage a proxy war with Russia, the same way that Reagan did with Afghanistan back when there was still a Cold War, when Afghanistan was at war with the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union went bankrupt because 10 years into the war, they couldn't afford it anymore. And they were like, God, we're done. And they fell apart. And the reason they fell apart was because of their communist structure. Okay? They were a very brutal country under communist regime. Dear sweet old Uncle Joe, that is Joe Stalin, who is referred to as Uncle Joe. Yeah, he was. Look it up. He was responsible for the execution of somewhere around, it's suspected, 50 million Russians, running like slave labor camps and all kinds of problems. And Puck suggests that Project Ukraine is officially over. Sorry, Joe. Yeah. So they figured they could probably do the same thing to Russia again. We'll just wage another proxy war. We'll keep funding Ukraine until Russia falls apart. Russia's not the Soviet Union anymore. And that's what Tuck is saying here. He says USSR was utterly eaten up by corruption and nepotism that accelerated the collapse. Right. Now let's go to the debt clock so I can make my I can show you what I'm talking about here. Pull up the US debt clock, my favorite new tool. I recommend people take a look at it if they haven't seen it. Here's the debt clock, okay? It shows this is our personal debt clock, and there's Doge still chugging along at 147 billion now, projected savings. But they have the world debt clock as well. Okay, so click world debt clock, and it'll show you like the top, I think 25 countries for debt, of which, unfortunately, the United States is at the top of that list. At the top of that list. We're the worst one on this list, okay? We're in debt for 36 trillion. 11 trillion, more than 11 trillion of that is Joe Biden all by himself. He tacked on an additional 11 trillion during his tenure, making us the worst in history. Worst in history, okay? So we are, or were, because Trump has figured this out. The Biden administration, for some reason, hasn't. And Ukraine hasn't either, because Ukraine doesn't give a shit what happens to us. Or at least I should say the Ukrainian government doesn't care, right? Let's fight a proxy war. We're going to bankrupt Russia. We are 36.5 trillion in debt, thanks to Joe Biden. Let's move down to Russia. Watch this. Russia, as of right now, is less than $500 billion in debt. 468 billion, $892 million. And they're at war. We're going to bankrupt them? Russia doesn't rely on much. Most of what goes on in Russia is produced right there. They don't outsource very much for goods and services like the United States does. That's why we're in so much freaking debt. They don't outsource for very much at all. They don't need other countries for energy production. They don't need other countries for fuel. They don't need other countries for food. Most of what goes on in Russia, they do themselves. And they don't have a massive population. I think Russia's population is less than half of the United States, even though Russia's bigger. But keep in mind, most of that is wilderness, just like in the US. Most of the United States, when you look at that big map, there's very few actual populated areas. The majority of the United States is wilderness. Russia too. There's something like 148 to 150 million people in Russia. Their national debt is almost the equivalent of Elon Musk's net worth. And we're going to bankrupt Russia in a proxy war. As I pointed out, Russia is not the Soviet Union. It's very different now. And like I said, they're at war. They're the ones that can afford to play the long game if it's American money. Seriously. Stacy says, a little late today. Happy Friday. I'm glad I made it. What are we talking about today? Well, we talked about Epstein a little bit. And now we're talking about Ukraine and how Zelensky is flip-flopping again because he just had a blowout at the White House. Tuck says Germany's going into its second century of self-immolation, isn't it? Germany? Is Germany? Yeah, Germany is on here. Let me see where they are. Germany is $3,512,000,000 in debt. That's a lot for a small country. For a population of 85 million people, 85.5 million people, that's a lot of debt. China is the second largest in the world with roughly 16 trillion in debt. So they're less than half of our debt with, 1.4 trillion people. Or excuse me, 1.4 billion people. I read that wrong. They haven't gotten that bad yet. 1.4 billion people in China and almost 16 billion in debt. But as spread out as China is and as big as the population is, that's harder to maintain than it is for us. Japan is 12. Is that 12 trillion in debt? That's surprising. India is 3.6. The UK is just over 4 trillion in debt, and they attribute a lot of that to their involvement with the European Union, which is why they got out of it. Italy being almost 4 trillion in debt is kind of surprising too, because they've got a very small population. But yeah, back to the point. Actually, Russia's one of the lowest debts on the top 25 on this list, not counting Taiwan and Sweden and Saudi Arabia. They've got one of the lowest debts on this list. Monkey says the US debt clock has an app on iOS and Android for $4.99. It shows more information. Okay. Good to know. Dan says getting that one world order in line. Yeah. And Paul says the United States spends too much money on chemtrailing. Is that what it is? And all people said Kissinger helped to place us in debt, arranging production facilities to send production facilities to China and making USA service not productive economy and flooding us with migrants. Yeah. But yeah, we're not going to win a proxy war with Russia. They can go on and on and on because they don't have that much. They could wrap that debt up in a short amount of time in comparison to the rest of the world, especially when you're looking at the trouble that the United States is in. And again, courtesy of who? Biden did that. We were already like way over anyways, but he tacked on an additional 11 trillion that didn't have to be there. and getting it back. I mean, again, people mock Doge. They look at this ticker, 147,591,000,000 and counting. Oh, it's a drop in the bucket. That doesn't mean don't do it. Absolutely do it. We need to. Look how much trouble we're in. If we kept doing a proxy war, if we continued that, we're the ones that will go bankrupt, not Russia. We'll go bankrupt, and then Russia will just do whatever the hell it wants. So it's the most ridiculous thing. And honestly, we're doing a peace deal or trying to negotiate a peace deal, which Trump was doing, is doing them a favor, because he's not going to put any more money in that country unless there's an investment, which is why they talked about mineral rights, which Zelensky said yes to, and now he's being a butthole. Changed his mind again, or whatever the hell's going on. We'll see. We'll see if he flip-flops again. Maybe if he does a couple of lines, he'll feel better, and he'll come back and sign the document. So I don't know. I don't know. Incredible. Tuck says Kissinger was evil. Kissinger was crazy. That guy was crazy. He lived way too long. You know, that's why they have that old song, "Only the Good Die Young." Again, hoping everything looks and sounds good, because we are now on StreamYard again, and we're off of Restream, even though they begged, borrowed, and stole to try to get me back. Offered me 20% off, offered me, and they've been putting up shorts. You've probably seen it on Coffee Talk, throwing out shorts, 6 days of free shorts based on your live streams, guaranteed viral shorts, guaranteed 86% probability of viral content. None of those shorts are going to be viral, okay? I'll be lucky if they get 400 or 500 views. That's crazy. But he may yet fold again and sign. He needs to. He's not getting any more money from the U.S. unless there's a deal. And if there is a deal struck and Ukraine backs off, Putin will back off too. I'm pretty sure of it. Putin's probably not going to be there much longer either. I mean, he can only make himself president for so long. And then you'll have to deal with whoever the next guy is, and that may not be that much better. And Paul says, live stream is great. Thank you. I try. I mean the quality as well. That I want it to at least sound good, even if it doesn't look fantastic. If it, I want to at least be able people to be able to at least hear me clearly. Excuse me, especially since the podcast gets picked up by Fistful of Radio. So ABC News. We're getting back to this again. Haven't heard anything about the fires in California for a while, have you? Former Los Angeles Fire Chief Kristen Crowley appeals her dismissal over the deadly fires. Yeah, they fired her. They finally fired her, and she's trying to sue for her job back. The diversity hire of the year. You know how kind of like on I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, they had Pimp of the Year. There should be an award ceremony for diversity hire of the year. That is the diversity hire that was the biggest failure. And she can be tied with Kamala Harris. So getting into the article, former Los Angeles Fire Chief Kristen Crowley is appealing her dismissal nearly a week after Mayor Karen Bass removed her from the top post in the wake of the devastating Palisades and Eaton fires. And the only reason that Mayor Karen Bass is doing that is to cover her own ass, because she's been under fire for weeks. And Karen Bass, I've never seen anybody with such a clueless expression on their face. You know who I'm talking about. You've seen Karen Bass, I'm sure. She looks so blatantly clueless. she reminds me of some of the mental patients that I used to work with when I was working in mental health, where they had this just kind of blank, just, I don't understand anything you're saying expression on their face. Like there's something really wrong with her upstairs. So back to the article, Crowley sent a letter to the Los Angeles City Council Thursday informing them she's proceeding with an appeal of Bass's removal of her as fire chief. How you get an appeal getting fired? It doesn't work. According to the Los Angeles City Charter, the appeal would require the approval of 2/3 of the 15 city council members to overturn a firing. She ain't going to get it. In response, I'll be surprised if she does. In response, a spokesperson for Bass's office said in a statement, former Chief Crowley has the right to appeal her dismissal, I guess legally, if that's how it is in California. Bass removed Crowley from her position Friday, saying firefighters were sent home instead of being used when the deadly fires broke out last month. We know that 1,000 firefighters that could have been on duty on the morning the fires broke out were instead sent home on Chief Crowley's watch, according to Bass. Furthermore, a necessary step to an investigation was the president of the Fire Commission telling Chief Crowley to do an after-action report on the fires, and the chief refused. Ronnie Villanueva, a retired LA Fire Chief Deputy of Emergency Operations, was appointed interim chief. Crowley exercised her civil service rights to stay with the department at a lower rank, with duties to be assigned by the new interim chief, according to the mayor's office. Have her make coffee and sandwiches. The former chief said it was an absolute honor to represent and lead the men and women of one of the greatest fire departments in the world. I'm extremely proud of the work, sacrifice, and dedication of our Los Angeles Fire Department members, both sworn and civilian, she said in a statement on Saturday. I really don't know what she sounds like. Here she is. This is the mayor. Okay, there's Karen Bass. See that look on her face, like she doesn't even know where she is? And Puck says, don't hire angry lesbians. And AI reminds us her surname is Crowley, like the infamous devil worshiper. And also keep in mind that her other two big DEI hires were also had the same first name. All three of them had the same first name. It was weird. There you are. There you are. But yeah, she always looks clueless to me, like she doesn't even know where the hell she is. But I mean, she doesn't do anything without being told to. She's a puppet. She reminds me of Joe Biden in that regard, where I don't think he made any decisions on his own. I think that she waits to be told what to do. That's why when she was confronted at the airport about why she was in Guyana, she would not speak at all and just kept facing the wall. I'm sure most of you have seen that footage. I know I showed it a couple of times on the podcast. She didn't know, no one had told her what to say, so she didn't speak. That's the kind of person that is. Doesn't know what to say unless she's told. But yeah, they finally got around to firing the fire chief. There she is, or former fire chief, Kristen Crowley, who is now trying to appeal for her job back. Hopefully she doesn't get it. She never should have had it in the first place. Just another DEI hire that failed at her job. Failed at her job. Speaking of failures at their job, although this one won't go away. This one will not go away. She just keeps coming back. And no, I don't mean Kamala Harris. I got one just as bad for you, though. Washington Examiner. AOC, everybody. Anybody interested in hearing about AOC? Sure, why not? AOC demands to know whether the Department of Justice is investigating her over ICE instructions. She demands to know. I demand. I wonder how far I would get if I demanded anything of law enforcement. So Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is inquiring to Attorney General Pam Bondi whether she's under investigation for advising constituents on how to respond to visits and requests from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers. In a letter to Bondi sent on Thursday, AOC asked for clarity on whether the Department of Justice has yielded to political pressure and attempts to weaponize the agency against elected officials whose speech they disagree with. You mean kind of like how your office did to Trump? It doesn't feel so good when you're on the receiving end, does it? Does it? The correspondence comes after New York Congresswoman's office held a webinar in February called Know Your Rights with ICE that informed undocumented immigrants how to handle situations involving immigration officers. She did not attend, but it was hosted on her Facebook page, where members of her office characterized the raids as political tactics. Migrants were told not to open their doors to ICE agents unless they were presented with a warrant. The webinar, in addition to posts by AOC regarding ICE and President Trump's executive orders on immigration, caught the attention of border czar Tom Homan. He asked the Department of Justice to look into whether AOC's actions were illegal or not. I've asked, where is that line of impediment? Where is that line of indifference or interference? Excuse me. Quote from Homan. In her letter to Bondi, AOC, some recent remarks from Vice President Vance. In her letter to Bondi, Ocasio-Cortez cited recent remarks from Vance. Quote, we may do the public square. She also referred to the details of the First Amendment. It's probably the first time she's ever looked at it, calling Homan's attempts to politically intimidate elected officials such as herself a textbook threat to freedom of speech. It's funny how when it's against anyone else, they don't care. We're going to suppress anyone else, we don't care. Oh, I can't talk? I demand action. I demand. And Raccoon would love to see AOC in jail again. And Paul says the waitress again. Actually, I believe she was a bartender. I wonder if it was a topless bar. And Savage C. Lee said AOC for porn 2026. Oh, no. Oh, no. Fluke Man says he looked up Ukraine's gold reserve. They have 27 tons. Experts estimate gold potential is at 3,000 tons. 1 ton is worth $55 million. Mark Felton said that's how Brits paid the U.S. during World War II. Interesting. So there we go. Tables are turned on AOC, and she doesn't like it. Now her freedom of speech is being infringed upon, and she wants to quote the First Amendment. And she wants to claim that the Department of Justice is being weaponized against politicians. But again, when that was happening to what she might consider to be a political opponent, she didn't care. She was all for it. They're all for shutting you down. But when it comes around, and no one told her to be quiet, did they? All Homan said was it illegal for her to do that? Let me check. No charges have been pressed. No threats have been made, I don't think. And Lucky wants to know if I'm using StreamYard for call-ins. Does StreamYard do that? Does StreamYard do that? I don't know if I'm quite at the point of call-ins. I don't know if I'm at that point. And Paul says, no freedom of speech in Britain now. I knew it was coming. That's why I left. Yeah. The United Kingdom has gotten really bad for that sort of thing. Really bad for that sort of thing. They crushed a lot of people's rights. It's unfortunate that that's the direction that things went in there. They took away people's rights to be armed. They've kicked around the idea of banning steak knives. I mean, they've taken away everything they possibly can in England. I mean, they're like really close to just falling into a socialist regime themselves and ending up like France. And that would be really bad. Things are already tough enough all around. Tough enough all around, ladies and gentlemen, without that sort of thing going on. What is this? Oh, God. Here's something I wanted to share. I thought you'd get a kick out of it. No, that's not what I want. Hold on a second. Just want to share something that I came across that I thought was pretty funny. I'm going to share it to the stream really quickly. And it is actually Bernie Sanders fighting with RFK Jr. Bernie Sanders fighting with RFK Jr. I know if you're listening and you can't see, you don't know what you're looking at there, but that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah. And it's photoshopped, and the sign on the guy holding up the old man says Big Pharma. Big Pharma. I just thought this was really funny. That was clever. Because, Bernie Sanders has been going after RFK Jr. pretty hard. And RFK Jr., as most of you are well aware of, does not like the idea of people just popping tons of pills. Brian says gun control is a tool by the government used to make us dependent on them. Exactly. And Tuck said, excellent meme. Yeah, it is pretty funny. That is pretty funny, but that's about what it looks like. Bernie doesn't have a leg to stand on, especially after it was revealed how much kickbacks he's gotten from Big Pharma through lobbyists. I just got a kick out of that, and I thought I would share that with everybody. And who can see? Like I said, not everybody can see that. Not everybody can see that. But there we go. There we go. All People says AOC hates white people and moved her boyfriend into her DC apartment and paid his bills. Latinos say she's radicalized in the streets, yet colonialized in the sheets. Was that what it is? Is that what it is? Well, no, it's because what AOC is doing is putting on a big act. She doesn't care about any of the things that she talks about, like a lot of these politicians. It's an act. You think Maxine Waters really cares about anybody? Or Bernie Sanders or any of them? They don't care. AOC doesn't care either. She's smart enough to pull the wool over people's eyes, if nothing else. But anyway, with that, we are at the top of the hour. So I will go ahead and start signing off. Again, you are listening to and or watching Coffee Talk, and you can find the live portion Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube on Coffee Talk and Prepper University. You can find me on X at Coffee Talk Chat. You can find me on fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta. And you can find me on Rumble on Coffee Talk 2 with the number 2. So thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. As always, hope you got something out of the conversation. And we will see you again
on Monday. Also, remember, I got a new video up on Coffee Talk this week. I think I have 2 up on Coffee Talk this week. I don't know if anyone has seen them or not. So check them out if you get a chance.